Hello, Prime Media audiences. This is Ladette, your host here from Addis. I am back with my special guest from the United States. It's Mr. Lawrence Freeman. Mr. Lawrence, welcome back again, our usual guest. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you and taking your time from your busy day and discussing Ethiopia again. Thank you, Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So let's just cut to the chase and start out with what's happening, what's current, what's going on in Ethiopia. What is the U.S. stance currently? Political prisoners have been released. That's been something that has pretty much shook a lot of Ethiopians here in Addis. As far as I can tell, a lot of people have been questioning the decision of the prime minister. And then at the same time, the prime minister has also discussed that there are steps that are going to be uncomfortable that he will be making in order to bring peace, reconciliation, and rebuilding of the country since the conflict we've had for about a year. There are also some changes with the attitude towards Ethiopia. What are your thoughts currently?
Again, thank you, Ladette. The situation in Ethiopia, people have to realize what the policy coming from the United States, in particular in the West overall, really what's behind it, what's it all about? And the key question is, again, as I've discussed before, this is all comes down to geopolitics. And frankly, the United States and this effort against Ethiopia is being led by the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. They used a rubric of human rights and democracy and so-called concern for the people of Tigray, but it's actually not what's motivating it. What's motivating the policy against Ethiopia, and they using the excuse of what's happened in Tigray and other regions, is control of the east coast of Africa. Because if you look at the situation along the water, which borders Somalia and Eritrea, you have the Indian Ocean leading into the Gulf of Eden, leading into the Red Sea, and into the Suez Canal. And from a geopolitical standpoint, those people in London and US who want to control politics in the world, want to control trade, economic, and commerce in the world, they want to control this area. Under the previous control of the TPLF, in the previous 27 years, there was a clear arrangement between government officials in the United States with very close ties to the PTLF, supporting the TPLF, and they had the control that they wanted. When Prime Minister Abiy was chosen in 2018, before actually he was elected last year, he immediately destabilized that. I don't think he knew what he was destabilizing, but he immediately set up new relations with President Isaias from Eritrea, and he wanted to establish a relationship of Somali, Eritrea, and Ethiopia. That violated the rules of geopolitics. The geopoliticians were not going to have independent people like Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and Isaias Afwerki controlling this vital waterway, this vital sea lane. And that's what they've been about. And they've made this very public in an article in December from Chatham House. And therefore, they used the conflict to demonize Prime Minister Abiy, to weaken the central government. And now there is a discussion of negotiations. And the West is pushing very hard that there be negotiations with the TPLF, and which does not include disarming the TPLF beforehand. And the idea is to build up a sort of dual power relationship with a weakened central government, which is the opposite of what Ethiopia needs, and a power base coming out of Tigray, which, as most people know, represents less than 7% of the population of Ethiopia. And they will now move from what's been called by one article I read accurately, from a process of regime change, which has been what they've been pushing for, to regime castration, weaken the government, and therefore try to gain control with Abiy in power, but a weakened Prime Minister Abiy, a strengthened TPLF region. And then they will break up any idea of Eritrea, Somalia, and Ethiopia controlling the area. Now, people will say, but Ethiopia doesn't have a coastline. If that's true. But Ethiopia is the powerhouse of the Horn of Africa, if not the powerhouse of East Africa. So if you want to control that region of the world, you have to control Ethiopia. 115 million people, one of the leading economies in the African continent, growing and expanding, and has very close relations with China. So the policy of regime change may, I say may, have been transitioned to a policy of regime castration. We don't know what the discussions that Prime Minister Abiy had with President Biden, which immediately followed his release of prisoners. I don't know what Prime Minister Abiy is planning. We did have a US delegation of the new ambassador envoy from the United States, David Satterfield, and Molly Fee, the new US Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs. I don't believe they actually met with Prime Minister Abiy, but they're going to push this line very hard. They're going to use human rights, scream about it over and over again, which is a complete fraud. They were screaming about human rights, Blinken and company, even before they took office. This was late 2020, before to 2019, before Biden even took office in 2020. And they're going to use more threats of sanctions. And you can see how ugly the US policy is towards Ethiopia when they removed Ethiopia from AGOA, which immediately is hurting a couple of 100,000 Ethiopian workers, primarily women, hurting the economy. And they lumped it together with Mali and Guinea, who both had coups. There was no coup in Ethiopia. So this is hardball. And my concern is that the Ethiopian leadership does not understand what is in store for them, does not understand who the enemy is. And if you don't understand who your enemy is, like I do, then you can't defend yourself. And Ethiopia is weakened financially. And I think the vultures of the geopolitical crowd and the Blinken crowd in the US, they say, aha, you're weakened financially. You want to rebuild your economy. You need us. You need the world financial institutions. Therefore, you will do ABC if you want to get out of this mess. And whether the government understands that, whether the government is prepared to respond to that, I don't know. I've offered my thoughts and advice. I'm not sure they're being taken seriously. But I think Ethiopia is in a very precarious position right now.
So do you think that Ethiopia is unable to withstand the financial problems that it has without the major institutions, or is it much easier to actually succumb to that trap?
No question about it that Ethiopia is suffering. The West is playing hardball. My sources tell me in Washington that Ambassador Feldman was replaced by Ambassador Satterfield because Feldman was too soft on Abiy and they wanted a hard liner. Now, yes, sanctions are brutal, and I hate sanctions. They serve no purpose, and the United States is using them all over the world. And now we're threatening preemptive sanctions against Russia, which is completely insane because that's a risk of war. But the sanctions are taking effect. Now the country, the leadership has to decide whether they're going to fight it. I mean, countries do survive under sanctions. There are many countries in the world right now who are sanctioned by the United States and they survive. Whether the Ethiopian leadership understands the policy coming, geopolitical policy aimed at Ethiopia, what's behind it, whether they are prepared to fight, whether they have determination to resist. If you want to resist, there are things you can do. There are alliances around the world you can form. There are alliances in Africa you can form. You don't have to give in. Once you start giving in, then you're starting down the slippery slope. And I don't know if Ethiopia is starting down the slippery slope. I know that my advice or my analysis so far has been rejected by the Ethiopian government. And I understand the US government policies and geopolitics very well. So I can't say for sure which way Ethiopia is going. Clearly, the Ethiopian people were very upset at the release of prisoners on Christmas, Eastern Orthodox Christmas Day. The diaspora community in the United States is extraordinarily upset if you look at the comments they're making. Therefore, Ethiopian leadership, can they count on full support from Ethiopians in the diaspora? They might be telling them, look, you have to support us. We know some of the things are not pleasant, but the alternative is worse. And they may be using that to influence the Ethiopians in diaspora to give them support. I'm not sure that's a good strategy. My strategy is know your enemy and fight, and don't give in.
Yeah, and then, just this week now, we're hearing that TPLF is back to attacking the Afar region. So it's kind of, like you said, we are, in the slippery slope road, instead of being in a situation where we actually have accomplished something. At least we're not seeing it right now. What are your thoughts? Every time TPLF is attacking, I've been hearing about, and we're actually been seeing some videos that's been coming out of places like Lalibela, where they have attacked the regions, and it's the damages are significant. Obviously, we're not able to go assess the situation in Tigray. I'm sure there are a lot of suffering there too. It seems like TPLF is still holding the entire country hostage.
Yes, it breaks my heart really to hear about the attacks in Lalibela, a place I visited last year and I hold very dear to my heart and my spiritual existence. And these are the reports that are coming out that the TPLF has not only not disarmed, but they're moving on various military campaigns into the neighboring regions. My analysis will be that this will not be discussed in the West and the news media, the great news media, so-called objective, truthful media. They will not discuss this. The game plan from Blinken and all, which was really, as I said, began actually in 2019, early 2020, when the United States and Biden, if he was a true friend of Africa, and Blinken, if he cared about the politics of the United States and of Africa and our allies, they could have ended the war in February, certainly by March of 2021, by demanding that the TPLF stand down and surrender and give 100% support to the sovereignty of Ethiopia and its elected leadership, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Not only did the United States not do that, but Blinken used unconfirmed reports. There was no intelligence from US intelligence to back any of these reports up of genocide, human rights violations, sexual rape as a weapon, food as a weapon. And Blinken shot off his mouth on these things, and that was picked up around the world and used by every other country. And there was no proof, and there is no proof today because the investigations are going on. And the UN said there was no proof. In fact, it was lying by UN officials on the question of rape. So the Blinken crowd is going to play up violations by the Ethiopian government. And they're going to use them and say, aha, Abiy, look what's going on to Tigray. You're killing innocent people. You're dropping drones in them. And what the TPLF is doing will be played down. And this is the strategy to squeeze and sanction the government. So the government is weak enough, undermined, that it has to turn to negotiations with the TPLF, which obviously the people of Ethiopia don't want. I am not anti-TPLF. I am not anti or pro any group. I am pro the sovereignty of Ethiopia. I am pro the nation of Ethiopia, which has to have a central government. And ethnic federalism is a failure. It always would be a failure because the nation state is not made up of ethnicities. It is made up of citizens of the nation of Ethiopia. And the United States could care less about the citizens of Ethiopia, and these cries of human rights violations are phony. They don't believe in them. They don't mean them. They're using them. And my hope is that the Ethiopian government understands this and understands what I'm saying.
It's clear that Dr. Abiy is not working with ego per se. He looks to be making everyone uncomfortable at times, and seems fair across the board. And at least, you know, you see different groups at a different time being upset about a decision he's made because it was not favoring them. And I think that's also one of the reasons why Dr. Abiy has probably had one of the greatest supports in regards to elections and so forth, because he has truly not really appealed to one particular group in Ethiopia. Is that helping, or is that harming his administration? Because the Ethiopians in general are not used to that type of um, rule of law, or I should say that type of administration. They're used to an administration that's totally, a dictator, and their views are pretty clear. They're either one-sided, and there's no in between. What do you think about that?
I think one of Prime Minister Abiy's greatest strengths is that he understood that ethnic federalism had to be jettisoned, and that he wanted. And when his formation of the Prosperity Party back in 2019, I support 100%. He's correct, and it's a revolutionary, bold move he made. And he understands that the nation of Ethiopia is a nation. It's not a mosaic of different groups. There's only one Ethiopian citizen. We don't identify ourselves by what piece of ground we came from or what our bloodlines are. We identify ourselves with the aspirations and development of our nation. And the nation of Ethiopia is one unity. And he understood that we had to move away from ethnic federalism. I am sure that this has made everybody uncomfortable. Amara, Oromo, TPLF, etc. Because as you mentioned, this is not the way the country has been ruled from 1991 to 2018. But that's good. People should be uncomfortable because they have to rethink. They have to rethink the policy of their country, which is a good thing. Human beings are endowed with the power of creativity given to them by the Creator. And therefore, everybody is very similar. So Amara, Oromo, Tigray, etc., they're all God's creatures. And only we have the power of the potential to use our minds to discover the universe and advance civilization. And therefore, ethnicity has the opposite effect. It divides people, it degrades people, and you can't carry out a national policy based on which political ethnic group is in power or wants privileged rights or wants to be granted this or that political control. And it is uncomfortable, and I think he did the absolute right thing, and that I support him. I hope that continues. There is discussion of a national dialogue. I have not seen any detailed analysis of who will be leading the dialogue, how it will be conducted. I haven't seen that, but a national dialogue is necessary, but it should be conducted on the highest level, not which group gets which division of benefits. It should be conducted on the level of we are Ethiopian citizens, all have a common interest in developing our nation. And let's discuss the problems that ethnicity brings, that it actually is a degradation of an Ethiopian citizen, and therefore have a robust discussion. I hope that happens. It could turn a different direction, which is what do you want, what do you get, and parceling out the more divisions. We have to end the ethnic divisions in Ethiopia. They were wrong from the beginning. They're wrong now. They will always be wrong. Anybody who says we should have a confederation, which allows each next group to participate autonomously, and then the government has certain overall responsibilities, that's wrong. There was a robust debate in the formation of the United States in the late 1770s, 1780s, whether we were going to be a republic with a strong central government and those that wanted the power to be in the states. And Alexander Hamilton convinced George Washington, the first president, no, we had to have a strong central government to be a republic. And Washington agreed with him. And that was one of the greatest accomplishments in the history of mankind, was to have a republic with a government where the states had certain powers, but the government had the overall responsibility for providing credit and public policy to benefit the public good, as it says in the preamble of the US Constitution, that the government exists to benefit the general welfare of the people living and those yet to be born. And that is what we have to fight for in Ethiopia. And if Prime Minister Abiy fights for those kinds of ideas in this dialogue, he will have my support 100%.
Yeah, it's kind of amusing because even within ethnic groups, right, there are a lot of differences, and even though the ethnic federalism is the biggest highlight, even within ethnic groups, different ideologies, different opposition parties. At least I think today or yesterday, there's been a campaign by opposition Oromo groups who are saying, they want to make sure that the national dialogue is fair, and it includes every group. And I think, obviously that's the goal, is to include everyone. What are your experience, or what are other countries that have used the national dialogue to solve this kind of problem? Because I think, next to ethnicity, one of the struggles that Ethiopia is having is understanding that there might be different ideologies, there might be different ideas of policies, but we still have to be under a rule of law, and we really have to work and campaign in a legal way to see if the ideas that we would like to come forth be adopted by the citizens of Ethiopia. Any great examples for Ethiopia?
Well, as I said, the United States is really an excellent example, because it was really hardcore ideological differences. You had Hamilton and the Northerners who said, look, we want to develop our economy as an independent republic, and that would require manufacturing and economic progress. You had the Southern states' right people, led by people like Thomas Jefferson and others, who said, no, the US economy is agrarian based. We don't want manufacturing taking over. We don't want a central government that tells us what to do. And it also was a support for slavery. These issues in the United States that developed in the 1770s and 1780s existed throughout the entire 1800s. There was a group called the Nullifier movement, which opposed the central government of the United States. And this led to an atrocious, horrible civil war, which lasted 4 years and killed 750,000 Americans, 750,000 Americans, and almost destroyed the Union. And if not for President Abraham Lincoln, we may never have existed. And the whole world would have been different if the British had separated the United States again with the South. So in this debate and this dialogue in Ethiopia, there's going to have to be reason. Reason is going to have to prevail. It should be robust. Everybody should be included. I don't mind opposition. I've been an oppositionist at various times to my own country. I have nothing against opposition. People should bring in new ideas. We're not attacking or degrading, dismissing any culture, any people. This is a country of 115 million people, and let the debate of ideas begin. Let policy begin. Let's have a policy debate. Is what should be the policy for the future of Ethiopia? How much should we put into manufacturing? What should be our commitment to infrastructure? What new rails are we building? How are we proceeding with the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam? How should we use that electricity? What kind of expansion should we have for our industry? There is a lot of questions that should be debated. Let ideas flow, let policy to flow, and let's have a debate on citizenship. Does ethnicity mean citizenship? When I first landed in Africa, I read about it for years in 1994 in Nigeria. I was appalled by the ethnicity divisions between the Yoruba, Igbo, and Hausa. And that was my first introduction to it. And again, if you go to Ethiopia as an example, they had a war far worse than what you just went through in Ethiopia and are still going through. They had the Biafra War, lasted 3 years, killed over 1 million people brutally. And that was because of ethnicity. So ethnicity has to be recognized as a defect, not the culture of each people. That should be respected. And Ethiopia has a wonderful, rich culture. In fact, a lot of the culture comes from the north because that's where the country began with Aksum. And therefore, there's no reason for people to think there's a different culture. There's a rich, multifaceted culture in Ethiopia, which is, I'm always learning more and more about, and I'm excited about it. But let's start from the premise in these dialogues that we have one Ethiopian nation, and there is the conception of a nation state. It's a valid conception. Let's debate it if you don't understand it. And there is a Ethiopian citizen of a nation called Ethiopia. Let's debate that if you think that doesn't exist. But the days of one group controlling, one group getting power, one group getting economic benefits, that's over. In my view, I like ideas. I love discussion of ideas, and I'm an independent thinker, which gets me in trouble sometimes. So from my standpoint, I say, let the debate begin, and let's have it civil, but let's have it on ideas and without attacking anybody, but discussing the future of Ethiopia. And that to me would be refreshing to all of Africa, because look at all the ethnicities that exist in Africa. If the TPLF would have gained control or dual power in Ethiopia, which is what the United States wants, then this would be a real problem for the rest of Africa, because it would tell each ethnic group, well, go to war with your central government, you'll get rewarded. So I would like to put an end to ethnic power and ethnic economics and go back to nation state development. That's what I think is the most important thing that could come out of this dialogue.
We can go on for a long time, Mr. Lawrence. I love our discussion, but since we're running out of time, just last one bit. What would make every group in Ethiopia comfortable to say, yes, this national dialogue was inclusive? It's not easy to please, like you said, we have 150 million population, over 85 ethnic groups. What is one thing that the Prime Minister's administration can do to, you can never be perfect, you can never please everyone, that he can do to make this national dialogue successful and credible, at least for him and for his administration, I think, which is most likely run by the Ministry of Peace?
Well, one is that the dialogue has to be open, and there can't be any fear or concern of letting more people involved. I mean, there should be representatives that really represent the entire population, 115 million people. But the dialogue, from my standpoint, if I was conducting the dialogue, I would start from the highest principles of law of the universe. We are all human beings. What does that mean to be a human being? That we eat? No, I mean, animals can do that. No, it means that we have a higher power that's only been bestowed on human beings. No animal has the power of creativity, to hypothesize, as Plato said, one of my heroes. Therefore, we start from the standpoint that what makes us human is our mental capability of discovery of the principles of the universe. Therefore, we are all alike in that regard. Now, what does that mean for our nation of Ethiopia? It means that we should be striving to use and nurture and develop those creative principles which exist in every human being, whether you're Tigrayan, Oromo, Amara, etc. Every human being in the world, just like every human being in Ethiopia, has those powers. How do we as a government develop those powers, nurture those powers, realize the discoveries of our young people to apply to new discoveries of the universe, to lead to new technologies, to advance our industrial capability, to improve our standard of living? All Ethiopians have a common interest in developing the nation of Ethiopia. So let's discuss what policy we should have going forward that benefits everybody, not one group over another group. This is a mistake that countries make all the time. President Lincoln had a Reconstruction program for the development of all the people after the war. In fact, his second inaugural address said, "Charity to all, malice to none." Therefore, we find and discuss a policy that represents the interest and the self-interest of all 115 million Ethiopians, which is what? To improve the standard of living, to eliminate poverty, to have your children live a better life than you do, to have a commitment to the future so you're not concerned about what's going to happen to your children and your grandchildren, to believe in the government of the nation state because the nation, that government represents your interest. If you don't like that government, vote them out. But vote them out based on a better policy that you have for the leadership of the country. So therefore, the dialogue says, what are we as a people of Ethiopia? What is our future? And how do we all benefit? Common interest of all of us benefits from the expansion and development of our nation. And let's have that discussion and let us put forward better ideas and be persuaded by the power of reason which ideas are better and which are not. And therefore, let the robust discussion begin.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. It's always a pleasure. I will obviously be inviting you again. I really thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure, and hope you're going to be coming to Ethiopia sometime soon again. Hopefully.
I would like someone to invite me because it is extremely cold over here, and I miss that warm Ethiopian weather.
Yes, it's very sunny right here, right now. So, yep.
Well, it's freezing over here.
Oh. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you, and I'm sure we'll be reaching out to you sometime soon. Thank you so much, Prime Media audiences. This is my half an hour with Lawrence Freeman. I'll be back with another guest. Thank you.